wonder if there's something about the way that we got here that makes us not only human, but certain experiences more real. So, for instance, if you put on a VR helmet and you were able to go to the Grand Canyon, I think there's this thought experiment like, is it different? What's different about it if like imagine 20 years in the future when every pixel you cannot tell the difference and they have wind and sound and warmth. Well, what's different is that you put on a VR headset rather than going. There's something that's different about the path that you take to get there. So something about path dependence, which is a concept in physics, by the way. So there's something that is not just about the state, but how you got to the state as well. That's important. So I think that's important about that's an important factor that makes us human. But I don't know how to articulate that. Hello, Tony.
Hello.
So Tony is of the ArtisanTony channel. Meet Bernardo, meet Dan, meet Christina, meet Jack if you haven't already.
I had to come in and give Bernardo some backup.
So Bernardo, I'm sorry, Tony, like because you just came into the middle of a fairly deep conversation, like one of the deepest. What does it mean to be human? Okay, well that's a deep topic because to me there's something about understanding that allows for the forgiveness or is the same as. But we can talk about that another time. So I have to urinate, and this is a live stream, and I'm not supposed to leave for like 8 hours. So Christina, I'm gonna put you on the spot and say, can you host the TOE podcast, Christina, for the next 5 minutes or so? I know that's a long time to urinate, but I also want to stretch my legs.
I just got here, Kurt. You can't leave, okay?
Tony, I'm coming right back, and you're staying on for a little while.
Okay.
And Bernardo, Jack, Dan, if any of you have to go in the next 5 minutes, I'm just going to say bye now. Christina, is that all right?
Here.
I'm fine. I got it.
Thank you.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Christina is the new host of TOE, and see you all in a... Thank you, Sam. Sam, you're going to hate Sam, by the way, Christina.
Well, since Tony just entered, Tony, give us a little bit of a background of who you are and what your research entails for those that may not be familiar with your work.
Well, I'm a design build contractor in Tennessee, and I live in the deep woods. Now, I noticed most of the most intelligent guests had libraries behind them, so I'm broadcasting from the Trinity College in Dublin library, and so
that's the only way to do it, Tony.
That's right. So I represent the layman of the bunch, I think, but I've been interested in this field, for all of my life practically, and I really wanted to share something that I created when Curt gets back. And this goes along with something Bernardo was talking about. It's a graph that I created. And so I don't want to get into it too much, if you don't mind, until Curt gets back, because I want to hear his input. But I appreciate being here, and it should be fun. I hope it does lighten up a bit, because I know I've talked with Avi. I actually volunteered for the Galileo project early on, doing some CAD work. I'm a design build contractor, and I do design work, and they're really just like by the book. They're not like if you get them in the bar, they're still going to be down the line, straight by the book, and
go ahead.
I do find it easier to debate Avi when he's not here, so I drew this for after he left, so.
And I'm also aware that you make some music as well. Is that correct?
Most of the music is made by my sons, Barrett and Alex, who are musicians. But I was a musician earlier in life. I got them involved with music when they were young, and now they're professional. Alex is a producer, of music, and Barrett teaches and also is a content creator. So I've tried to influence them as much as I can. They're obviously much more talented than I am now regarding music, but my music tastes are much more Tennessee deep woods banjo, and theirs are a little more hip than mine. So.
Well, I have a question for the entire room, and that is, what was your favorite news story of 2022 about UFOs or whatever mysterious topics that you've looked into throughout the year?
But I think that could eat viruses, and somehow I think that personally much more interesting. I don't know why, but because they also found bacteria that could break down plastics. So that's some hopeful news. There you go.
That's very cool. And Bernardo, what about yourself?
Oh, my heart is torn across three. I'll mention them briefly, and you take your pick. The proof of principle of nuclear fusion was something that will be in the annals of history for centuries to come. And two breakthroughs in immunotherapy for cancer, one for rectal cancer and one that's probably applicable to many, many different forms of cancer, one in the US, one in the UK. It's for the first time in my lifetime that I hear cancer news that truly may be the beginning of something and not just, something that cannot be replicated or is only applicable to a very specific form of cancer. No, these two things, these opened doors here. So I think we will remember 2022 first and foremost for the catastrophe of what Russia is doing in the European continent after we thought large-scale war was a 20th century thing. But we will also remember 2022 for the fusion breakthrough and the immunotherapy breakthrough for cancer therapy.
And Tony, what about yourself?
I literally was going to say the breakthroughs in fusion, also because one of my disappointments, honestly, with science is that, and I drew this graph while Avi was speaking. So this the double dashed line is is AI, okay, and as what's the background is going crazy, isn't it? So as the ability of AI gets greater over time, then the practical knowledge of humans goes down like this. And at some point, there will be a point where humans cannot decipher, between the two because of I believe at some point we will, the knowledge, what am I trying to say? There's a gap, but that's widening between practical knowledge and science, practical science and theoretical science. The gap is widening, right? A lot of this is just my intuition. One of the things I was born with, I think, was a great intuition, and my intuition tells me that the gap is widening to the extent that the practical things like the fusion discoveries and continuing. How long have we been working on fusion, Bernardo? For 40 years or something? Longer than that, 50. That
70 years we've been trying.
Yeah. So that it seems like there's a gap and it's growing, and the more scientists that make the jump to just being theoretical, and maybe I'm wrong, but again, this is my intuition that's talking. There's no proof of this, but at some
Tony,
point,
I think you are 120% right, and you touched on one of the greatest dangers to civilization.
Thank you. But it's just, you get this. I've seen one of my challenges for people, in 2023 is to get back to the new and away from the woo. That's my challenge and the new is to going back to the grind of science. Grinding out those experiments, doing the hard work. People give Einstein a hard time because of his reluctance to jump on board with quantum mechanics, but he may end up ultimately being correct. So I don't think.
Who were you talking about just now?
Einstein.
Einstein. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, these are not. I'm not. These are my impressions. I don't have a lot of knowledge to back them up. These are just impressions I've formed over the last. I turned 60 in October. So
before I leave, I wanted to amplify what Tony said. I don't think anybody else is latching onto that, but I think he just said the thing that needs to be said, and I would like an opportunity to amplify that at some point. Doesn't need to be now, Curt.
Well, if I hear you correctly, it was going to be my next point. If I'm to speak about something more cerebral or scholarly that has captured my attention this year, it's about AI. And I think that there's so many advances in AI And there are different critical points for different types of technology. So, for instance, when it comes to electric vehicles, apparently when you hit the 5% mark of people having electric vehicles, that's a critical point because afterward adoption accelerates. I think this year we've hit a critical point in AI to the point where this podcast is going to focus more on AI. And it's something I never thought that I would. And I'm interested in it from its technological applications, how it works, its relationship to consciousness, but also the threat. I think that the people who are, and I said this on someone's podcast, Martin. So sorry, Martin, if I didn't give you an invite to this, I apologize. On Martin's podcast, that I think that the people who are working for OpenAI and Google, Google Brain, and Microsoft and so on, that they're like the engineers. Sorry, they're like the physicists of the late 1930s and early 1940s working on the bomb, the atomic bomb, where they're so jazzed about the physics of it that they're not thinking about what are they creating. And I think that something will happen where they're going to be like Einstein, who said, I'm paraphrasing, he'd burn his fingers or he'd burn his hands if he had known that his creation would have produced that. I think that the people who are working for OpenAI, they think in terms of, like I mentioned again this to Martin, that we're having such fun talking about these subjects, but it's much more fun to work on these subjects, to actually work on the engineering. I don't think they're thinking about, I don't think they're thinking much about the implications unless it's something positive, and then they're deluding themselves that it will only be used in a positive sense or that it could only be used in a positive sense. And I also think that they may be thinking, well, look, if I'm not working on AI, someone else will. That reminds me of this movie, I think it's called Lord of War with Nicolas Cage, where he said, hey, I'm going to be a weapons dealer because if I'm not, someone else is just going to take my place. And I think that's an extremely poor position to be in and a poor decision to be made. I think that you should constantly worry about, am I keeping my own hands clean, and not worry about if someone else is going to dirty their hands in place of me. And I believe Bernardo Kastrup, you have to get going. So
No.
If you don't
I
mind.
don't have to get
Oh.
going. I just didn't want Tony's point to be lost as we move on to other things.
Thank you, Bernardo.
Okay, so I'm not sure if I hit Tony's point. So Bernardo, do you mind just touching on it before this gives Professor
Okay.
Ashtekar some time to think about that 2022 question?
So I will express my possible misunderstanding of Tony's point. I think the graph he showed, what it shows is that because we have so many tools that automate things for us, and with the advent of AI, this is accelerating. Everything is getting automated. We don't need to think about things anymore. We are retreating into a world of pure conceptual abstraction and sort of losing touch with reality, with the reality of building something with your hands, with the reality. And it doesn't need to be low tech, even high tech. I mean, if I can express some of my perennial frustrations, there are two fields very close to me, which sometimes I fear are getting lost in conceptual abstraction. One is computer science. It has separated itself from computer engineering to the point that computer scientists now that are doing the talk show round and the podcast round, they don't really know what a computer is because they're operating on layers and layers and layers of abstraction, libraries and APIs and whatnot. And then you can get into a situation where you say, well, if the silicon computer is sophisticated enough, maybe it's conscious. That's what you get when you get lost in abstraction. Another field that I think, and this is not, I'm not saying this because Ashtekar is here, and I don't think he is an example of what I'm about to say. An example of what I'm about to say is precisely the person who wrote a book called The Lost in Abstraction, which is theoretical physics. If it departs too much from experimental physics, from the raw reality of what you have to do to see a physical effect on a measurement surface, I don't think it is good. I worked at CERN for a couple of years, and to mention an explicit example, I'm not going after this person gratuitously. It just happens to be a good example for what I'm trying to say. Sabine Hossenfelder, who is famous for the statement "lost in abstraction," I think she's completely lost in abstraction. I think the entire point of superdeterminism is based on those hidden variables that nobody defined. And you're trying to propose an experiment that needs to control for the initial conditions of these variables without defining them. I mean, if somebody had spent time doing experimental physics, you would know that we would never have found the Higgs boson if a physicist, Peter Higgs, hadn't defined for us what the Higgs boson is. What is the energy range where we expect to find it? What does it decay into? Very important, because we never measure the Higgs boson directly. It decays quickly. What interacts with measurement surfaces are the footprint of the Higgs. It's what it decays into. Now, Peter Higgs gave us hints about that. Two bottom quarks, maybe a W and Z boson. Now we know even two muons can be the result of the decay of the Higgs boson. And I was there building the stuff to find the Higgs boson. And we built it based on the knowledge of what it would decay into. So the second level trigger in the data acquisition system of the Atlas is based on rejecting events that have jets and no heavy electrons or muons. It's part of it. So without grounding theory on experimentally verifiable things that allow us to build an experiment, one is lost in abstraction. And superdeterminism is a cruel example of that, because it comes from somebody who makes this point that we shouldn't be lost in abstraction. Well, congratulations, then don't be lost in abstraction. Give us a theoretical handle that allows us to verify and disprove the hypothesis, and not propose experiments that are so vague as to be impossible to do. And even if we could do them, they would never disprove the hypothesis, because you can always say, well, the experiment failed because we couldn't control the initial conditions for the hidden variables. Well, why not? Because you haven't defined them. How can we control for the initial conditions? And these are examples, I think, Tony, I don't know whether I'm taking you too far, but these are examples where we lose touch with the concreteness of things we can hold in our hands. I don't know, scintillating tile in a tile calorimeter. Touch that thing, see it feed a photomultiplier, and then you're close to reality. Or in computer science, build a darn computer. No one computer a year keeps the mind clear. Build a toy computer, but ground your computer science in real stuff, and not in a lost world of pure ungrounded conceptual abstraction. And that's what's happening, and AI will make it worse. How many people today own a car and a house without knowing how to change a fuse or a tire? I mean, or to fix something in the roof. I mean, this is concerning. I used to be in semiconductors manufacturing for many years. I would tell you a few years ago, I think it's much worse now, that there are about 2,000 people in the world who know how to start from sand and end up with an Apple Macintosh. About 2,000. It's probably less now. If those 2,000 people tomorrow selectively die, we're screwed. And that's the problem. And I think Tony's graph shows that this is only going to get worse, especially with AI that is replacing us for the basic things with which we maintain friction with reality.
All right. Thank you, Bernardo. Professor
Okay,
Ashkan.
since you mentioned me as a theoretical physicist, I just want to say that I completely agree with you that that there has to be much more grounding with the reality, with the experiments, but I don't agree that everybody has to build a computer. If I try to build a computer myself, I would probably break so many things that it's not worth it. But on the other hand, I should be aware of how to
Computer
build a computer,
scientists.
etc.
Computer scientists should build a computer.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, I'm not sure that I can actually do things with the photomultipliers either. But on the other hand, I know what they do, and I know, so that the basic point, I agree with you, and I think that there is a tendency, for example, in string theory, to move way too far away from the actual physical world, and then you just define certain things to be interesting, even though they have nothing to do with the actual world we live in, and I think that is not a good direction. So I basically, at the fundamental level, I agree with your viewpoint.
I feel passionate about this because I got burned very early in my life. When I was at CERN, I was in my early 20s. And, the media talks about, the LHC and the Atlas, the CMS being all about finding the Higgs boson. People who were there knew it was not about that. We had events of the Higgs boson since the LEP. We just didn't have the statistics. I was doing this for Susie, for supersymmetry, because I thought this is so beautiful. It has to be true. It just has to be true. It cannot not be true. And it's not true. And that burned me pretty bad. And so that's, it's echoing in my heart still to this day.
Yeah.
I have a question for both of you, if you don't mind. Will we not at some point in the future find that there's a physical connection between things like consciousness in our brain, and then physical connections between entangled particles? You know what I mean? I'm a physical type of person, and I would love to think that it's not woo, that eventually we will be able to drill down enough to be able to find these connections between, because so many people outside of science, especially on social media, have this tendency to create this sort of mysterious world around, it's like living in a simulation. We can't imagine that there might be a physical connection between entangled particles light years away. Or, does that question even make sense?
As for entanglement specifically that you asked, there doesn't seem to be any direct relation between that and the brain. The brain seems to be a little bit too wet, too hot place that could cause decoherence rather rapidly. This is a hot debate that has been going on. But at the moment, the scientists from neuroscience actually are of the opinion that that entanglement does not have a big role to play. They may be wrong, just because of decoherence effects.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant connections between particles, not connection between our consciousness and entangled particles. Yeah.
Bye-bye. Sorry, so Professor Ashtekar, you were in the middle, and then also Kevin. Just something to chew on in the meantime is the question, which I'm taking from Christina, of what is it about 2022 that is at the forefront of your mind? So what strikes you as something that's most memorable? Ashtekar.
Yeah. So
Ashtekar, not for that question, but for answering Tony's question.
Yeah. So Tony's question was about entanglement of actual particles. Is that what you're saying, Tony?
I was asking, is the current schema to think that there are actual physical connections between entangled particles, or I guess this is really directed at the woo. I would like to get back to more of a physical science than a
physical
theoretical
Good.
science.
Right. No, yeah, that's right. So the entanglement actually is real, and there is no question about it. And that actually there can be quantum entangled or kilometer scales. And this is, the partial answer to Christina's question was one of the exciting things for me was this Nobel Prize, which was given for quantum information, and particularly for Antoine Zeilinger, who was the first person to really push these things. Not entanglement, but the technological aspects of entanglement, to showing that in fact this entanglement exists over several kilometers, and that is actually being used for things like this course for banking systems and so on. So it's actually has had, because it can go over kilometers. So it is, it's real. There's just no question about it. Entanglement with physical particles is absolutely real, and is even finding applications.
So let's talk about something lighthearted. What is it that you do, Kevin, for just for fun? And same Bernardo and Tony. I'm curious. Tony, what's your answer?
I think I love this idea of trying to. I just turned 60 in October, and I guess we all go through this phase where we want to kind of document our life for our children. I do, because when I was growing up, my parents weren't they were very elusive, and I didn't learn anything about some of their past until late in life. So I'm writing this book called The Artisan Philosophy, and it'll be out in January. I've been working on it for 7 years, but here's a picture I'll share. That's me on a roof in 1979.
It's getting removed. So
I need to put it in front of me, don't I?
Just hold it over your body.
Yeah, this is a.
There we go.
It's more like a picture book of of the past and some of the history, local history, and then it goes into how we've lost the idea of mentorship and apprenticeships, and how people when have a certain skill level when they get my age, they should start mentoring younger people and inspiring them to become you know that they can become successful and happy in just normal jobs. I started off as a child playing with Tonka trucks, and now I'm a design build contractor, and I'm very happy. So I'm just trying to learn how to write. It's kind of funny you mentioned Chat GPT earlier. I took a couple of paragraphs of my book and put it in there, and it slaughtered it. And so now I'm all worried that I'm concerned. But anyway, I was just kind of kidding around about that. But yeah, I'm trying to learn how to write. To be honest with you, that's a hobby.
To learn how to write.
Yeah, I'm writing this book, and I'm not a very good writer, so I have a quandary. So,
Bernardo.
I love building 8-bit computers from scratch. I do
You
about
mentioned that.
I do about one a year. Open source, so it gets picked up by companies. The latest one was just picked up by a company from Eastern Europe called Olimax. They are selling it now. I restore very old computers. Actually, I can show you. Let me see if it will work. Do you see a computer more or less in the center of the screen right now, in the shadow?
Mm-hmm.
That is a Q1 computer. It's the Q1s were the first microcomputers. In other words, self-contained computing systems with a microprocessor inside. They came out in December of '72, and there are 3 or 4 surviving units. One of them you have just seen, and I am reverse engineering, documenting, and restoring it in a collaboration across 3 museums, one in Sweden, one in Germany, one here in the Netherlands. I volunteer for the one in the Netherlands. And this year I'm building a mini computer using those old 74 logic chips, which are like the little building blocks of the original. I can show you, but I have to go to my workbench back here to pick it up. But it has hundreds of chips, 4 different cards.
Can you just do that just for fun, Bernardo? Would that be okay?
Yeah. I'll turn off my camera for a second. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
10 seconds.
And then bring your cat too.
I'll be right there.
All right, I'm gonna let in Anthony Metivier. Hey, how's it going?
Anthony.
Good to see you. It's been how long?
Well, definitely long. Longer than short, that's for sure.
So I'm gonna place the links to your memory detective in the description, and just for people, Anthony is a memory expert. So if you have any questions about how do you increase your memory, or you want to memorize some set of facts or some, I don't know, a ritual, whatever it is, you can place those questions
pick it,
in the
I
chat.
will help you stick it.
I need that.
Great. Okay, Bernardo.
So
Sorry.
this one I just finished. The computer has 5 boards. This is the control board. It's the most important one. I just finished 2 days ago. Then this is the addressing logic board. Here.
Yeah, cool.
And then, oops.
Oh no! Oh shoot! I'm sorry, Bernardo.
Register file board.
Good job. That's a good one, man.
And the final one, the ALU board. So this is what I've been doing for fun.
Great, man. Okay, well, we'll talk after, Bernardo, because I have some questions about that.
No, that's it. It's just an old-fashioned mini computer with a custom RISC CPU.
And everything that you do that's for fun is something, I consider that to be cerebral. Maybe you consider that to be more bodily because you're now like a carpenter where you don't have to think much as you're creating it.
Yeah, I can measure the signal with an oscilloscope. I see what it is. I use a multimeter. I probe and I see. And the wonderful thing about computer engineering, which we don't have in philosophy yet, is that your bullshit is short-lived. If you do something wrong, it doesn't work. that's it. It's the end of that story. While in philosophy, people insist on their bullshit for an entire career because there is no immediate and incontroversial way to just say, this is nonsense, stop it, move on, abandon it. It doesn't work. And computer engineering is very grounding for a philosopher like me.
Okay, well, I want to talk to you all for so much longer, but we have to take about 15-minute break, so I'm kicking you all out. It was lovely to see you. Kevin, sorry I didn't get to speak to you for much longer. I would love to, and I'm sure we're going to speak, well, we're going to speak in a few months within a few months, maybe even within 1 month or so on the TOE channel. We'll go in depth into your new TOE. You have a TOE, a theory of everything. I'm looking forward to delving into that. Bernardo, as always, it's great to have you
Pleasure,
on,
man.
And Tony, it's great to see you. Jack, great to see you. Anthony, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye,
Kurt.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Kick yourselves out. I feel
Thanks,
bad.
Kurt.
for
Great fun.
a little-
Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Please leave, everyone. Please leave. Jack, I don't know what you're doing. You gotta move that hand.
You
Click on
said
it.
you were going to
There
kick
you
us
go.
out. Okay.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Kurt.
Oh yeah. Well, I want you. I'll kick you out. I just.